Okay, in the course of AP, I'm going to be referencing certain historical thinking skills that we're going to be really concentrating on. And so I want you to be familiar with the terms and familiar with exactly what they mean. So when I talk about historical causation, okay, basically causation is just what it sounds like. Why did stuff happen? What was the impact? What is the long-term effect? What is the short-term effect? Okay, so what was the cause of the Battle of Lexington Concord? So the cause of it was basically you had colonials who were plotting, and the militias were training, and they had weaponry, and basically it came to the English's, I don't think that's a word, the English attention, and they were going to march to Concord and confiscate those weapons and arrest John Hancock. So the cause of the battle was the fact that these troops had been quartered in Boston, tensions had been rising, and they were marching. So that's the immediate cause. What was the impact? The impact was an amazing impact because it was a victory for the colonials. After the initial devastation at Lexington, the Minutemen were called. They end up regrouping at Concord and forcing the English back to Boston, inflicting numerous casualties upon them. And then they surround Boston. So causation, those are those things that you're looking at. The long term, of course, is American independence. Change and continuity over time, or continuity and change over time. You will hear me say CCOT, and this is something we look at a lot. What has changed over time? What has stayed the same? So in this particular example, you've got an amazing entertainer that remained an amazing entertainer throughout his life, but the physical change is quite evident. So basically what you're looking at is what stayed the same, his talent, what changed, his appearance, why did it change, how much did it change? You could go back to childhood, you could go back to his relationships. A lot of things are unknown, and you can speculate, but you can speculate with evidence. So periodization is just basically what it says. If you look at your historical time periods, they are turning points where they end. The historical time period 1 ends in 1607, and that, of course, is Jamestown and the beginning of colonization in the New World. Other turning points include 1754, which is the French and Indian War, and the end of salutary neglect in the colonies, where the colonies actually start thinking about independence because of the English needing money and inflicting taxes that are unrepresented, and eventually a revolution. So if you look at those, each one of our historical time periods have these turning points in history, and that is periodization. Okay, comparison is pretty easy. You can compare political parties, you can compare economic policies, you can compare social events, social movements. In this particular case, you're comparing football and soccer. So you got diehard soccer people that say that's a world sport, and you got the football players that say that's America's sport. And there are comparisons with the athleticism of them and the crowds, and of course there are definitely things that you can say contrast. Contextualization, these are events that connect things in place and time. 9/11, of course, would connect to the war in Iraq, and you're connecting these different events to this happened at this place, which results in this place. This is contextualization. This is something we're going to talk about a lot when we actually are writing our DBQs and our long essays. And I always suggest we use contextualization in our first paragraph before the thesis to get those. Historical argumentation. So this is basically what are the two sides of the story, evaluating historical evidence and making an historical argument, acknowledging that there is a counter argument in many cases, but presenting your argument with concrete facts and evidence. You can watch that video if you get a chance. It's rather compelling argument that the United States is favoring Israel over Palestine, and it's interesting because John Stewart is Jewish, and yet he does acknowledge this and makes the argument that that might not be a fair political position. Okay, this is using evidence to make your arguments, to come to your conclusions, and we're going to be talking a lot about that with hipping documents and so on. You've got to interpret where are people coming from. How do their perspectives change over time? How they might change politically? How does the country as a whole change over time? So interpretation, this is something you can use on a personal level, or you can make it a broad worldview. And then some of you may recognize Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon is a movie star, and basically the argument says that you can connect to any event, you can connect to any person with just a series of 1, 2, 3. For instance, with Kevin Bacon, they say anybody can be connected to Kevin Bacon using just 6 steps. And in this particular case, I have met Kevin Bacon, you have met me, so you actually connect Kevin Bacon in just 2 steps. That is synthesis. You are thinking across time periods, thinking across things like, because of course I'm nothing like Kevin Bacon, but how do these things relate? What do these things have in common? We're going to talk more about synthesis.